Welcome. I'm Julian Rogers in the Turks and Caicos. We're here to chat with the Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, none other than the Honorable Washington Mizik. He is the current chairman of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, who are due to hold their governors meeting here in the Turks and Caicos in June. We'll talk to the Premier not only about his role as the leader of the country, but also as that of the President of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, and also the President of the UK Overseas Territory Association. He chairs the rotational position as the political counsel. He's also the Vice President of the Turks and Caicos branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and a representative of the Turks and Caicos Caribbean Heads of Government meetings. Of course, for CARICOM, he's also have that role of building the relationship with regional institutions as well. So, we welcome you, sir.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Welcome you, Turks and Caicos. Looking forward to a fantastic time here with the rest of the Caribbean and for the CDB board meeting.
Let's talk first, Premier, about the Turks and Caicos. How have you done?
Turks and Caicos has done extremely well. I mean, in terms of where we are and the recognition of the progress that's been made here, it's all been fairly new. Just about everything you see around here is less than 50 years old. So we're basically, can be considered the new kid on the block, if you like. But we have a very successful economy. Tourism obviously is our main industry. In fact, it is sometimes said that Turks and Caicos is probably the most tourism-dependent country in the world next to Macau. And but we've done very well. We have been able to consistently, for the better part of the last 6 years, produce a surplus in our revenue, government revenue, our budgets. We have a BBB+ credit rating. Government have zero debt, and a very hefty reserve, including a sovereign wealth fund. So I think we're doing very well, all things considered. You know.
As you say that, I have to ask you, how did you survive COVID?
A confluence of events or circumstances meant that we pulled through COVID very, very good. We had assistance from the United Kingdom. We got the vaccine early. Our population responded quickly, so we ramped up to about 80% our vaccination rate by the end of the summer of 2021, I think it would be. And then, of course, the fact that we entered the COVID with significant reserve, we were able to really preserve life and livelihood by actually assisting the population through stimulus grants and other assistance. So yeah, we've done very well through COVID.
So having gone through that period, what really are the new priorities here?
Well, you know, there's a word that's overused sometimes called sustainability. And our focus is on building resilience and sustainability. And that involves focusing on ensuring that not only sustainability in terms of the economy, but also in terms of our sensitive environment, which is very much tied to the economy. Everyone in this island and this country makes their living off the natural capital of the economy, so we're very concerned about ensuring that that is preserved, but also keeping a good social balance. Turks and Caicos depend very, very largely on foreign labor. And so we've got issues of housing and all of those kinds of things that we've got to focus on to ensure that the environment is not degraded and the five-star destination that we are known for is actually maintained. So yes, those are some challenges, but I think we've designed and are designing solutions and approaches to ensure that our economy and our social and environmental sectors are sustainable.
You're fresh from presenting a budget to this country. What would you say are the priority items that you're addressing in this?
You know, a big umbrella issue of my government is human capital development. Okay. Also, another big issue at the moment is price inflation. So what we, and of course the social quality of life issues. So my budget includes a lot of deals with how do we protect the vulnerable. So people are looking for social assistance. We've upped the level of assistance, investing huge amount of money in scholarships, grants, and full scholarships, and investing in education. We just acquired property to put TVAT, expanding or standing up in place a well-functioning hospitality school. So the focus really is on the human capital development, improving the social situation of the public, and also investing heavily in infrastructure, because I believe that wealth is created by the private sector. Government distributes it, but it's created by the private sector, and the private sector needs to have solid, dependable, sustainable infrastructure in order to run on and to develop that wealth.
Let's talk about the infrastructure. It seems the airport is a major priority here.
This destination is well served from probably over a dozen gateways in the United States. The United States and North America generally is our source market for tourism. We actually have outgrown our current facilities, and we have to be improvising in order to process the traffic. So we're making a huge investment in developing a whole new terminal that's going to probably run us into multiple millions of dollars. We're making some good progress with the consultancy, looking at the structure, ownership structure, the funding structure, and hopefully we can all have that done between now and the end of the year. So by next year, we can look at scheduling the actual construction time, which I believe will probably begin in 2024. These big projects have huge life cycle. It takes a long planning cycle, and so we're getting there. We're fortunate in that the Airports Authority itself have significant reserves, and so we should be able to do it quite comfortably without actually consigning the facility to an outside operator.
What about the communication around the islands themselves?
The communication around Turks and Caicos is in need of improvement. Dependency or the ability to communicate between the islands, particularly in a bad hurricane, is a problem. And we are now looking at actually putting a fiber ring around the islands to improve that. That is something that is also topical. And again, I expect that we'll see some movement on that in the current financial year.
Let's talk now about the relationships you have with the nearby territories, like the Bahamas, for instance.
Well, the Bahamas is considered to be family because their bloodlines, of course, the nearest Bahama island is 40 miles off from here. Anagua, Mayaguana, they're between 40 to 60 miles away. And so there's always been freedom of movement between here and the Bahamas, even when even in relationship to the legislation, it's not strictly adhered to when it comes to the movement of people between here and Bahamas. Everybody in the Turks and Caicos Islands and everybody just about in the Bahamas have families in both places. So that relationship is probably our strongest relationship because of our proximity, but also because of the bloodlines. between us. Of course, in my capacity as the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, I represent the overseas territories. The position, of course, as you know, is rotational. So I represent places like the British Virgin Islands, Montserrat, Anguilla,
Cayman.
and the Cayman Islands, and Turks and Caicos. But our relationship, our strongest relationship, remains with the Bahamas.
And the historic relationship with, say, Jamaica?
We have a historic relationship with Jamaica because we were sort of a sub-dependence of the UK through Jamaica up until when Jamaica became independent in 1962, right? Then we shared a governor with the Bahamas until the Bahamas became independent. And since then, we've had set up our own governor. So we're more direct. The relationship has become more direct between us and the United Kingdom ever since then. But we still maintain a very strong relationship with Jamaica. Of course, a lot of us, including myself, would have been educated in Jamaican institutions or regional institutions based in Jamaica. So that relationship is very strong, perhaps stronger than it is in the Eastern Caribbean, again, because of proximity and history.
I want to expand that then to the TCI's relationship with the rest of the Caribbean. Let's talk about your role in CARICOM.
I consider myself personally a Caribbean man because I've had the privilege of living in and visiting and developing relationships with people across the region. And I've been around, been involved in public life long enough to appreciate the contributions that have been made by the region. In the past, we've sourced teachers, doctors, engineers, police officers, and you name it, from different parts of the Caribbean, particularly places like Barbados. And more recently, a large number of our police officers have been coming from places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I have strong relationships with many of the leaders in the region by virtue of the long time I've spent in politics and meeting them one-on-one and developing relationships. So, I've come to value the importance of it. And while our growth has been uneven, I think it's critical that we kind of develop a mentality of one for all and all for one, because we live in a region that's very volatile, and one could be up today and down tomorrow, and so that sort of a dependence and the strength of having each other's back, to me, is very critical. And so that is something that I believe in, and I think in my role is something that I would like to focus on and promote, that regardless to where each of us may be in terms of our growth, economic growth, we should and could contribute to the region and especially to the bank's operation and the bank's sustainability and survivability, because I noticed in a lot of cases with some of the more prosperous economies, there's this tendency not to appreciate the significant role that the bank plays, and I think that is very short-sighted.
I'll just ask you to just respond to the offer from the president of Guyana, for instance, to deal with food security by offering the vast land space of Guyana for production of food and distribution across the region.
Well, I think that was very magnanimous of him. I think for a place like the Turks and Caicos, it was a small population and significantly removed. The logistical issue of transportation could be a problem in making use of that, even if you have persons here who may want to invest in agriculture or in growing food. There's still the question of how do you get it here. But I do believe there may be opportunities to trade with a place like Guyana, particularly when one look at, I don't know what's the state of their forestry products are, But given our construction boom here in these islands, if there are materials or construction materials that could be sourced from a place like that, it would be great. I mean, at the moment, we're sourcing it from other places in the Caribbean, including Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and Cuba, which tend to be a little closer. But again, when you look at what Guyana offers, I mean, most of the light poles are from Guyana. And when you look at the quality of the lumber, I think there are opportunities there to cross-invest across this region in each other's economy to the benefit of the region. I think sometimes we don't realize the strength that we have. We look out for everything and ignore the possibility of developing the relationships that we have by cross-investing in each other's economy, making it easier. I mean, a great example has been the Sandals Corporation and their ability to tap into the resources and provide employment opportunities for many destinations within the region, including Turks and Caicos. In fact, in a lot of destinations, the airline services have been improved as a result of having a large player such as Sandals.
And as you mentioned, an airline, you certainly have a good example in terms of interregional carriage within the Caribbean.
Yeah, we're very proud of Caribbean and its ability to reach out to the rest of the Caribbean sister territories, and I'm hoping that they can continue to, with their expansion and their investment. For us, it's a matter of pride to be able to do that.
Let's turn our attention to one of the other CAPs, that is the Board of Governors of the Overseas Territories. You've had this now role for some time as part of this rotation. What would you say are the priorities?
The overseas territories in the Caribbean have done well, by and large. Most of them, certainly the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos, have done very well. Some of the other territories in the Eastern Caribbean have not done quite as well. There's a terminology that came from a book that was written by another Caribbean personality that says small is beautiful, I think. And I think we underestimate the strength and the ability that we can, and the role that we can play in the region and in the CDB. And what I would like for my colleagues in the overseas territories to do is to, even though I am the rotational governor and the chair, I would certainly want to get their full support because I do believe that we could make this particular conference something extraordinary, and that their presence here could benefit them and the bank. I can certainly see a situation where certainly the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos are no longer sort of even though we may be borrowing countries, we're no longer dependent on some of the concessionary funding that the bank may have available, but some of our other sister territories are. And to the extent that we could contribute to the, I don't know, to some kind of fund to help with pockets of needs in those territories or across the region. I think that the kind of conversation we should start to have instead of constantly looking out for everything, because I think it's important to remember where we were once and relate that to where we are today, and understand that the big wheel comes around, and you never know if it'll ever happen again. So that's what I would encourage them to do, and hope that we can play a pivotal role in the success and sustainability of the organization.
the grouping as such has a particular relationship, of course, obviously, with Britain. How do you see the territories now helping to reshape the impression or the relationship with Britain?
Well, I tell you one thing, global Britain, in my view, seems very keen on maintaining a relationship with the overseas territories. I think it stands to reason that exiting a Brexit, it means that their sphere of influence is less. And also what we've seen recently with the royal visits through the region, that cannot make the assumption any longer that the former territories, the former colonies, are happy and is prepared to carry on as usual. So I think there seems to be a willingness to focus more attention on the remaining overseas territories. And to the extent that there's this idea of offering the overseas territories parliamentary representation, direct parliamentary representation in the UK, there are varying degrees of views on that. And it's not something I want to necessarily comment on, because I think, I don't support us being subsumed into the UK or anything like that. But I think the relationship in more recent times, particularly in relationship to the COVID pandemic, have actually served the Turks and Caicos and the overseas territories well. So I don't know where that relationship would end, but clearly there's a yearning from people everywhere to have control of their destiny. And that's where I will leave that. But I believe we do have a role to play in the region, even as we also are influenced and are supported by the United Kingdom. We have to exert our dependency. I rather like the idea of playing the game without the name, whatever, because I think it will serve us well. And I believe relationships are more important than labels. So that's my view.
And you wouldn't label that independence?
As I said, I think playing the game without the name is where my head is, but you know, that decision is to be made by the next generation. We are in the process of developing a more advanced constitution, or trying to, because what we've had, our constitution has regressed since 2006 as a result of the suspension in 2009. So we're looking at developing a more modern partnership relationship with the United Kingdom. Again, given our size, we have to be concerned, and particularly Turks and Caicos, given where we are located, with huge neighbors that are not necessarily quite as democratic as our tradition. We have to be careful about the relationships that we maintain.
And as you talk about your neighbors, Cuba?
Cuba we have Cuba, we got Hispaniola, both which are within 100 miles from our shores. Those are, and of course, our neighbor, the Bahamas. Jamaica is about 400 plus miles away from us. But that's would be our neighborhood there. But
and you're comfortable in that neighborhood?
The biggest threat to Turks and Caicos sovereignty, if you can call it that, since we're not a nation, is really this threat from illegal immigration from our neighbors next door to the south of us. And I do believe the region and the world have an obligation to do a better job of assisting our neighbors in Haiti so that they are not trafficked, because a large part of what happened is literally trafficking. Poor people don't even know where they're going sometimes, you know. So again, as I discussed with the president in the past, to the extent that the CDB and the region could develop initiatives to help some of our neighbors who are may want to leave, if we can create conditions at home which would prevent that from happening, fewer people will leave, and fewer people will lose their lives on the high seas trying to escape poverty, because it is an economic situation. And it's one that I think developed countries ought to be doing more about and are not.
Let's return now to the Caribbean Development Bank and its role, and you as governor. What would be your driving mantra to the bank at this stage?
I mentioned earlier, I believe, I think the bank has an obligation to prove its own continued relevance as well, but it depends on the governors, all of the countries, right, to take a keen interest in the future of the bank. And I think part of what I would like to see an expansion in the bank's membership, both regionally and globally. And what I'd like us to do again is to see how interregionally what we can do to help each other. Again, using the phrase one for all and all for one. You know, there are some of our countries who are doing quite well, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be contributing to lifting some of our other neighbors, or focusing on projects within particular neighborhoods within our member states. So I think it's a fluid discussion that we have to have. I think there need to be some brainstorming around how the bank could continue to be relevant, how it can be sustainable, what kind of resilient initiatives it needs to take. No one person has all of the answers, and that is the reason why it's very, very important for members to show up at the board meeting, and so we can have these discussions. Because I would not have detailed knowledge of what's happening in many of the sister or the member countries, the borrowing member countries, unless that face-to-face dialogue is had, and we can come up with a meeting of the minds. It's difficult to divine what each person is thinking and where the specific needs are.
You talk about resilience, a word used a great deal these days, sustainability, etc. How do you see those really impacting the choices we're making for the future of the Caribbean?
Well, I believe resilience to me is a very broad word. Speak in terms both of physical and systemic. Physical, of course, we live in a part of the world which is very susceptible to severe storms, hurricanes, and so I think we certainly need to be building on that kind of resilience, and I believe we do have institutions that have sort of answered the call. SEDEMA, we've got the strategic insurance program that helps the region as it relates to hurricanes through this, and this is all through the CARICOM. Yeah. But in relationship to the sustainability generally, I also believe there needs to be more from a systems point of view and from a management of the economy point of view. I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. We've got smart people within our diaspora. We have smart people within the region. There can be more in terms of knowledge transfer. There can be, and some of our people may even have resources that could be invested in